Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you, and welcome to our first live PDN Q&A with Rob Pincus, our Executive Director. We are encouraging people to also submit questions to the YouTube video. If you're on YouTube right now, you can just submit questions to the bottom of the video that you see right now. I am Sonia. I am PDN Social Media Manager. So with that, I will hand it over to Rob, which you all know.
Hey, thanks, Sonia. Just so everybody knows, PDN, if you aren't aware of it, isn't just a thing that we run under any of my companies, IC Training or Combat Focus Shooting, nor is it just like me at my house putting up an extra Facebook page. There really is a team of people, and I think this may be the first that anyone's actually gotten to meet any member of the team. So, Sonia, you're the face of Personal Defense Network headquarters back in Minneapolis.
Oh my gosh, that's so much pressure. But thank you. So we have a ton of questions that were submitted. We had about 200. We're obviously not going to be able to get through all of them. So I just want to just jump right in and get started so we can get through as many as possible.
And everyone should know that I haven't seen the questions. I did see some of the funnier, more entertaining ones that we aren't going to be using in the chat were sent to me, but I have not seen any of these questions. So the team back at the HQ decided these were the best, most important questions for us to talk about, and we certainly may be getting to some of the other questions as well, which I'll see after this live hour, and be answering them through our social media.
Okay. All right. This is from Tactical Texan. This came on Instagram. Do you believe every American has the right to own a gun? Should there be age limits? Should the blind be able to use them? Felons? Where would you draw the line?
I think everybody has the right, and everybody really has a responsibility for personal defense. We know that it's a constitutionally protected right to have access to firearms, to bear arms, and that's obviously incredibly important. I think that reasonable limits on that are pretty obvious. Someone who can't be trusted based on their prior behavior, violent actions based on their educational limits, someone who's not able to comprehend the use of a firearm and even the ramifications of what happens when that firearm is used, limiting them is common sense. I think if I had a firearm right here in the house and someone came into the house and was acting violently and intoxicated or wasn't able to intellectually comprehend its use, it would be foolish for me to give them access to that firearm. I think as a society it would be foolish of us to do that as well. All that said, I think it's incredibly important to remember that it's really personal defense that is the guiding factor, the guiding principle, and that defense extends to defending our family, defending others, defending our country, defending our way of life, and I think that's why it's a constitutionally protected right, as well as just a common sense responsibility that people have.
Okay.
Wow, we started off with a heavy one.
Okay, next one. It's more general, just about personal defense. Why do so many people forget context when it comes to personal defense? This is from Joshua. I see people who go to extremes and leave out the plausibility principle. What is the source of that disconnect?
Okay, first couple definitions. Plausibility principle is a concept that we teach in a lot of our programs. We've talked about it a lot at Personal Defense Network, and basically the guidance is that you want to train most of the time for what's most likely to happen to you. Of course, everybody understands that it's most likely that you'll not need to defend yourself, and certainly that you'll not need to defend yourself with a firearm. Luckily, the society we live with is generally peaceful. But once we step into the realm of saying we are going to train for personal defense, then we have to look at what are the most likely personal defense scenarios. Then context becomes incredibly important, because obviously the context of a law enforcement officer needing to use their firearm is different from the context of someone in the military needing to use their firearm, or someone that only has a firearm staged at home or in the workplace is going to be different from someone who carries a firearm in public. So adding those pieces to training is incredibly important. Otherwise, you're really just training what I call isolated skills. And let's be honest, it's more fun quite often and a lot easier to train isolated skills, especially when it comes to firearms. And that's why so many instructors, myself included, will draw a distinction between someone who's just training to be a good marksman or training shooting skills in isolation versus really training to learn skills that they can apply in a self-defense context. So unfortunately, I think the answer is laziness. It's just easier to be a good shooter. It's easier to buy gear to make you shoot better than it is really to have the things and have the skills develop the level where you can apply them in the context that suits your most likely need.
Okay. This is a follow-up to that one. Situational awareness is such a hollow term and rarely used with any explanation behind it. How can we who have threat awareness and risk management experience change the culture in the industry to understand how to detect and prevent an ambush-based attack?
That's a big question too. I will agree with the principle stated that people talk about situational awareness, and I refer to it as a security blanket. People talk about being in some awareness level, or they convince themselves that they can't be ambushed because they're always watching the doors. They know where the exits are. They know who's around them. The reality is, and I talk about it, the person mentioned ambushes. I talk about it in my book, Counter Ambush, and in some of the videos at Personal Defense Network, that there is a huge difference between intellectually, prior to going outside of your home, being aware that you need to look for exits when you go into a building, be aware of who's around you, know who's inside of, your reactionary gap, if you want to call it that, know who's in your immediate space. But we know there's a practical reality that limits that. We can't really do that, right? Unless I'm going to order off of a Braille menu and keep my eyes, moving around a restaurant, when I look down at that menu for that moment, I'm taking my eyes off of the area, and that's one obvious example, but there are countless others. The other thing you have to remember is that if someone does something threatening in my environment and I turn to focus on them because my situational awareness has allowed me to pick up on their behavior, once I start focusing on them, I'm not paying any attention to what's going on over here. So for me, the practical reality is you can't avoid being caught off guard. You can't really spend your time believing that you won't be ambushed and can't be ambushed. So it's, as a fundamental level training, I think it's important to start from being off balance. Assume that you are going to be caught off guard and you are going to miss things in your life, especially when those things are predators who are training and thinking about how to catch you off guard. So if your training isn't starting from that, whoa, I'm off balance, I'm shocked, I'm startled, I'm surprised moment, I think you're probably fooling yourself. Once again, you're taking the easy route of training for being on balance. That may not answer the question directly, but that's my best advice for people who are watching this is first and foremost, don't assume that any answer to how do we train situational awareness better will make it impossible for you to be caught off guard. All that said, contextually appropriate situational awareness, of course, is vital. It's a fundamental level of personal defense. Don't wander into the bad neighborhood. But remember, the bad people can be in the good neighborhood too. I think that's the bottom line.
Okay, this one's a little bit easier. We had a lot of questions about the best gun for conceal and carry. What's your opinion on that?
The conventional wisdom, the cliche of whatever gun you like, whatever gun fits your person, is really a flawed approach. What I think is important is that people start with some foundational principles. Right? We want a gun that's going to be efficient. We want a gun that's going to be reliable. We want a gun that's going to have a practical carryability, right? In other words, the size and fits your body. There's holsters available for it, things like that. It fits within the way you dress. And we want one that then we start to look at things like fits your hand, right, as opposed to somebody else's hand. One that you can afford, that's available in your area, things like that. The good news is that there are several different makes and models out there on the market that fit those criteria as a generalization. And then once you have those foundational models in your hand, or you can get to the range and try them out, or your friend might have one, then you can actually decide which one fits you best and which one at the end of the day you like the most, but not out of every gun in the gun counter. We look at modern striker-fired guns with no external manually operated safety, which requires an action that isn't already an inherent part of the shooting process. So that's a mouthful for people who don't know guns. People who do know guns can immediately start to get some ideas of what models we're talking about. We're talking about models that either have no safeties that require you to take any action, or most likely have a safety that is deactivated when you start to press the trigger or when you get your grip on the gun. Things that you inherently have to do anyway to fire the gun. The Springfield XD models, the Glock models, the Smith & Wesson M&P models are the three that I generally tell people to start with. I have carried Glocks. I currently carry an XD. I've never carried an M&P, but I've had great success shooting the gun and seen a lot of other people shoot that gun very, very well. And you have to remember that this isn't really just based on what I've experienced personally. This is based on thousands of students and thousands of classes, scores of locations all around the country where I get to watch people interact with guns. I get to see the guns behave in the training environment at the very least. And I've seen those 3 models from those 3 manufacturers perform exceptionally well to the point where they stand out above many other models. And even some models that I've seen perform very well, I've seen these models be easier for people to use, and especially new shooters, people new to shooting or new to defensive shooting, be able to pick one or more of these models up and use them very well. So reliability, efficiency, carryability, shootability then is how you fit with the gun. And then some of those models aren't available in certain states, or one may be at a better price point for you. You may have the opportunity to try one out and just know that it fits your hand and you like it. But that's what we recommend. Is there is no one size fits all, but I do think there's definitely a category that is a better place to start.
Okay. The next few are actually about conceal and carry. So this one is from Bob. I want to start carrying, but have not started carrying concealed yet. I have pistols to carry and IWB holsters, but I'm not comfortable carrying yet. How do I make the leap to carrying?
Training, exposure, practice, all of those things in that order, right? And I say training and then exposure and then practice, because training is really time, effort, energy, and money to get out there with an instructor that is teaching defensive-based principles in a defensive context, and really getting out there and not only learning to shoot the gun, present the gun from the holster, but really experiencing it under that supervision, hopefully in a group environment, in a safe, positive training environment where you're really getting critiqued and coached and being shown what you're capable of, right? That's going to be the best way. The other option is exposure to the concepts, which is watching Personal Defense Network video clips, reading our articles, getting the DVDs, reading the books, listening to some of the information that's coming out tonight, and then practicing what you've been exposed to. That's always going to be the lesser of the 2 choices, but it's not always plausible for people to go out and spend the kind of money that has to be spent to get to a class. Maybe there's not a class being offered near you. When we start a 2-day combat focus shooting class, our fundamental defensive pistol class designed for people who are carrying concealed, I tell people in my classes that I realize that they wouldn't be there if they hadn't already spent about $1,500 realistically, right? So you've got the tuition, you've got the ammunition cost, and the bare minimum of gear just to get there. Plus they may have traveled, they may have taken time off from work, there may be hotel expenses, and most people will have more than the minimum gear, minimum required gear. So it's not a cheap thing to go out and get really quality defensive specific training for me or any of the other top level instructors, including many of our PDN instructor contributors. But at the end of the day, there are other things you can do, but I really do think it's going to have to be an experiential thing. It's not going to be something I say, it's not going to be something you read in a book, it's going to be time in contextually appropriate training. Okay.
The next one is from Guy from Topeka, Kansas. What is the proper etiquette for your CCW when going to or being invited to someone's home?
If it's a concealed carry done properly, no one in your environment, whether you're in a retail environment, you're in your workplace, you're going to a friend's house, going to a stranger's house, whatever it is you're doing, they shouldn't know. So I don't know that everyone would agree with that. There may be other people who would say, well, it's your responsibility to tell them you have a firearm. I would disagree. I would say that it's your responsibility to decide whether or not it's an appropriate time to carry a firearm. And if it is, then go about your business and do it. The other side of that coin, not only from a concern of responsibility, like the person may not want you to be armed perspective, there'd be other people, in our camp, so to speak, who would say you should definitely tell them, because it lets them know, hey, I'm a friend of yours, I'm an acquaintance, you invited me to your home, you trusted me, you thought I was a decent enough person, and I want you to know that I'm responsibly armed, to sort of spread the pro-Second Amendment politics. And that's the choice some people will make as well. Me, if it's not something that they already know about me, if they obviously people know me, they probably know that when they invite me over, they're maybe inviting a gun over as well. But if they don't know me, if I'm going with some friends, I'm not likely to bring it up. In fact, I'm probably more likely not to bring it up or not to want it to be a topic of conversation, because the firearm isn't there for political purposes or conversational purposes for me. It's there for a worst-case scenario defensive moment.
Okay. We had quite a few questions about what to do when there are businesses that say no guns allowed. This one comes from Phil. I have a very good discreet carry situation and have a hard time giving up my carry rights when I enter those places. I understand the legal ramifications, but considering my desire for personal protection, what are your thoughts about discreet carrying in those situations?
I would never recommend that someone knowingly violate the law in order to carry a firearm. So whether it's a school zone, a legally posted private property, a state that they're traveling to, after drinking more than the state law allows you to drink, whatever that limit is. Some states it's zero tolerance, some states it's impairment, some states it's the same as a DUI. There's a lot of different governing laws that control when we can carry a firearm, even if we have a permit. So first and foremost, obey the law. Secondly, if it's a state, let's say it's a state where those signs on the front door say no firearms allowed, but they don't have the force of law. In other words, unless they're going to find out you have a gun, serve you with trespassing papers, and warn you, and then you go back again, there's not really any power behind the sign. My personal preference is to just avoid going into that place, right? That's the business owner's right. He owns that business, he owns that property. Just like the previous question, if that homeowner said, hey, I'd love for you to come over and, whatever, we're having a Super Bowl party this weekend, I'd love for you to come over, and you say, would I carry a firearm? And he says, don't come to my house with a gun. Well, you respect that person's property, choices. And I think we do the same thing for businesses. If you go in and your gun is discreetly carried and you aren't breaking the law and you do your business and you leave, well, then nobody's going to know anyway. So again, we're back to how discreet is the carry and what is the purpose. If you post pictures of yourself walking into that place in front of the sign, giving a thumbs up, showing your gun, and put it on your Instagram, now you're kind of being a jackass, right? If you're just going in there to do your business and you get out and move on, nobody's going to know, so there's nothing to be asked. But especially in the cases where it's a legal issue, I do not advise, and it's one of the reasons I talk about easy on, easy off holsters, whether it's clips, snaps, paddle. I really prefer those types of holsters, and having something like the gun vault, quick access safe, or someplace to lock a gun up in your car so that when you get halfway across town and you go into that place that you had to run your errand and you see that sign or you find out you can't carry, you are able to quickly remove the firearm, secure it in your vehicle, and then go ahead and go about your business without having to worry about violating the law. If you have a belt slide holster, one that's attached, that can be a little bit more cumbersome taking that gun on and off. But it's something that in the average day, if I'm carrying in a state where I'm legally obviously able to carry, I might 2 or 3 times a day need to take that gun off for one reason or another while I'm out, secure it in the car because of those laws. I wish they weren't there, but they are, and I think we have to obey them, obviously.
Okay. The next one, again, conceal and carry. This is from Lonnie, and I'm assuming on my own that this depends on state law, but can you have a pistol in your car without a concealed permit as long as it is in the open?
That is also very, very state specific, and it's probably even inside of some states controlled by municipalities at a lower government level. So that's something that people have to research. And in some states, the car is pretty much treated like your home. So you can kind of do anything you want once you're inside of it. Other states have very specific laws about how a firearm is to be carried or can't be carried. And obviously there's an overruling federal ruling that the Firearms Owners Protection Act, which says you can basically strip your gun down and store it locked outside of the passenger compartment and transfer it through any state, as long as you're going from some place where you can legally have the gun to some place where you can legally have the gun. Some states are more obedient to that federal law than others. There are certainly cases on the books where people have been charged, and in some cases I believe even convicted, of transferring firearms in a way that seems like it would be legal in terms of federal law, but violated state law. So it's definitely something people need to research. And this is one of those areas that, because I do teach all over the country and we have instructors that operate all over the country, we try to be really adamant about what I do, and what you heard me say I did in a class somewhere when I was in Georgia may not apply when you're in Massachusetts or California, and vice versa. So it's something that definitely needs to be researched.
All right. This next one comes from Brian. I know the need may vary depending on the state where a person lives, but overall, how important is it, in your opinion, for a person with a concealed carry license to have an attorney on retainer or on call in case you ever get involved in a self-defense shooting?
I think that probably is gauged by how often you engage lawyers, or whether you're the person that takes the warranty when you buy something at the big box electronics store and you're walking out and they offer you the warranty on the TV. If you're that person, if you have the maximum coverage on your car insurance, if you have cars that are paid off but you have extra insurance on them anyway, if you're the insurance lawyered person, you probably want to have the concealed carry lawyer standing by, the self-defense, pro Second Amendment type attorney as well. If you're not that kind of person, if it's A, not in your budget, or B, not in your lifestyle, I don't think it's a must. I don't think it's I would never tell someone that they're foolish for not having a lawyer, on speed dial and not having had the arrangement where you've kept them on retainer. Is it smart? Is it sound to go, consult with a Second Amendment savvy and personal defense, including firearms savvy lawyer in your jurisdiction, in your state, that you sit down and consult with? Sure. That may be the easiest thing to do, especially if you're new to this, if you haven't gone to the classes, if you haven't taken like a Masad Ayub Mag 20, if you're not a member of the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network, if you haven't been schooled in this stuff, find the lawyer. Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network is a great place to find the gun-savvy attorneys in your local area. Find that lawyer and pay him for an hour of his time to sit down and just have that conversation. And you'll get a feel, your budget, your lifestyle, whether or not it's something that fits for you. It's prudent, but not necessary.
Okay, that makes sense. This next one is from Frank. What are the 2 basic skills that new women shooters should know for personal and child protection?
Interesting. I would say that let's go ahead and say what are 2 special skills that we might have for a woman who is carrying a defensive firearm and has children around. Because obviously the fundamental skills are going to be the same. For the man, for the woman, whatever. The fundamental basic defensive shooting skills, presentation from the holster, all those things, maintenance, firearm safety, storage. Everybody needs to know those regardless of gender. Moving on to any parent who's thinking about defending themselves with a firearm while there's kids around, needs to obviously maybe work a little bit more on one-handed shooting, and even more specifically think about the body position you'd be in and how you'd be using your support hand to either push away, hold back, pull behind, hold up a child, maybe even to the point where we would never, generally we tell people to stay squared off towards the threat. But if you were holding an infant, for example, then we might tell you to go ahead and blade out, put your body between the bad guy and the infant, and shoot in a fully extended, more kind of saberish, rapier position. That's not what we would normally do. We normally stay squared off here, even if we were shooting one-handed and could hold somebody behind us. But things change when you start bringing that kid into the mix. So one-handed shooting, one-handed manipulations, and changing the context of where your body position is, and thinking about holding on to the child or controlling the child even down behind you, pushing them down to the ground, stepping on their thigh, keeping them down out of the line of fire while you're defending yourself. Those are the things that start to come into play at that point.
Okay, and this is kind of along the same lines. This is from Kelly. What brands of AR-15 rifles and parts does Rob recommend? And the second part, storage recommendations for a home defense AR-15 as a mom with 3 young children.
I'll go backwards. First of all, any firearm, controlling unauthorized access, that's our responsibility. We talk about the difference between staging a firearm and storing a firearm. I have firearms that are stored, and they may be in plastic cases with, a coat of oil. They may be stacked up, 3, 4, 5 deep in a safe, things like that, where I'm not planning on needing them, and when I need them or want to use them, I'm probably going to have to go through, 30 minutes of finding it, figuring out which safe it's in, what part of the safe it's in, opening the case, kind of taking that layer of oil off and really prepping the gun. On the other hand, staging is what we do with defensive firearms. So if you have a firearm that's staged for defense, then you have something that you really want to be able to get to very quickly. Obviously, I do a lot with quick access safes. Gun Vault is the brand that I use. They have a upright safe that's small, designed for quick access, called the TAC Vault, and that TAC Vault is specifically designed to hold long guns. They also have a device for the AR-15 specifically, which is a block which fits into the magazine well, and it also can be used to secure a long gun, an AR-15 type long gun, or AR-15 pistol for that matter, that's not going to be kept in a quick access safe. The downside there is it is keyed, and we generally like to avoid keys or combinations when it comes to something we're staging for personal defense. Outside of the kids in the house situation, what we're talking about here really is, again, unauthorized access. We want to keep people who aren't supposed to have access to the firearm from getting to it. And that can be, not having it stolen, not having it used against us, or not having people who aren't trained in its proper use or can't be trusted to use it responsibly from being able to get to it. That might mean that your perimeter of your house is secure, and you don't have people coming and going. You don't have kids in the house who aren't trained in the responsible interaction with firearms, and you may just have that firearm in a closet. You may have the firearm under your bed. You may have it leaning up against a corner out in the open. So your perimeter could be what controls access. For most people, especially with kids in the house, we're not going to trust that you have a good lock on the door. We're going to have a secondary way of controlling access to the gun specifically, and I recommend something that's a quick access model for all your defensive guns.
Okay. This next one comes from Patty. She says, I am a 66-year-old grandmother of 5 who has come to the firearms world only 3 years ago. Excuse me. It took me about 2 years to overcome my over-the-top fear of firearms, but now I'm having a blast. Could there be more instruction dedicated to my age or gender group? Like many senior citizens, I have health issues that are handicaps to my physical drills.
The easy answer from my perspective is that you need to kind of buyer beware on some of that specialized training. While there are certainly things that Patty, I think it was, may need specifically because of upper body strength, hand strength, maybe there's some arthritis. Sometimes with advanced age we see some shaking going on, some tremors, those kinds of things. We can address all of those for any individual, but let's remember that body strength, grip strength, arthritis, other disabilities, other handicaps, range of motion issues, they also plague people that are in their 20s, right? So gender-specific or age-specific training can sometimes just be a marketing gimmick, quite honestly. The fundamental skills are the fundamental skills, and most instructors should be capable of adjusting to someone's range of motion, strength, body type, all of those kinds of things that affect how they train and what type of firearm they're going to use, all of those things. So I'm pretty wary of gender-specific training or age-specific training unless it's clearly just a comfort issue, right? Maybe someone would rather train with, a woman might rather train with all women, an older person might rather train with all older people. Some of the younger guys that come out to the range, they would much rather train with a bunch of other younger guys that kind of get the references and the pop culture and all that. So I understand that part of it, but we really have to be careful about suggesting that there's special skills or special ways to train. Human people interacting with mechanical guns, there are foundational things, and then we tweak it based on everybody's strengths, weaknesses, range of motions, disabilities. So Patty, you find a good instructor, you find a good group to practice with, and I think they'll be able to accommodate any of the struggles you're having and be able to take advantage of whatever strengths you have that some of the other people in the group might not have as well.
Okay. And related to that, we actually got quite a few questions from people who either are in a wheelchair or have to use a scooter to get around. So there were quite a few about if there are training programs that are specifically for those who are physically disabled. Again, if someone's in a wheelchair, how should they carry their gun? How can they defend themselves?
We've talked about what we call limited mobility situations, whether you're on crutches or you use a scooter or a walker or a wheelchair. We've talked about that in some of our Personal Defense Network stuff. We actually have a DVD for wheelchair-bound defense. White Rabbit Solutions out of Memphis is the company that we worked with on that, and it's a great DVD. It covers a lot of things that I never would have thought of, and that's what happened. We brought the lead instructor in, who obviously is wheelchair bound, and he was able to help us come up with some really good things. Worked on one of the television shows I worked on several years ago. I think it was probably Best Defense, and we had Fred Kubitz come in, and I actually was just talking to him last week at one of our industry trade events. He came in and we discussed some things. That was years ago, and he really opened my eyes to some issues that are specific for wheelchair-bound people. So there are programs out there, there are instructors who specialize in it, and again, we do have one DVD in our collection and some of the clips online also that talk about limited mobility and specifically being wheelchair-bound.
Okay. This next one comes from Sean. It says, Rob, I am a low-vision gun owner. My sight is legally blind in the right eye and 20/70 in the left eye. I've thought about obtaining a carry permit here in Georgia for my Glock 19. I'm having trouble justifying the carrying a weapon for my safety and others. Do you know anyone out there that has low vision but carries?
I do, and in fact, this was, I think, maybe the first question was talking about limiting access to the blind, and maybe this gentleman is exactly the person that we're talking about. There was a big media buzz maybe a year ago about blind people being given concealed carry permits, and we all know that there's a difference between legally blind and you cannot see anything at all, and somewhere between perfect vision and you can't see anywhere at all is a big range. So the first thing I always say to people that kind of raise an eyebrow at the idea that someone who's legally blind could have a firearm permit and be carrying a firearm even in public, let alone inside of their home, is let's think about it. Everyone has a range under which they can see clearly in terms of distance, in terms of light. They have a range in terms of their periphery vision, how far they can see off to one side or the other to catch movement, things like that. So everyone has some level of limitation relative to whatever perfect would be. So the idea that someone is more restricted, again, that's like body strength. If we have someone who's older or less upper body muscle mass, they may not be able to control as powerful a gun, which means they may not be able to save themselves or other people from certain types of danger with every firearm that they can carry, but the person next to them might have a different firearm and be able to do different things. Well, that's real. Everyone's got different limitations. So I don't think we should arbitrarily say, if you don't have perfect vision or close to perfect vision, you shouldn't have a firearm. Just asking the question means that this person understands the responsibility of entering into the situation. And just because you have a firearm doesn't mean that you're going to be able to use it to solve every problem. You may have a flat tire, your gun's not going to help you, right? Like there may be other personal defense situations where running away and hiding is the best thing to do, whether you have a gun in perfect vision or you have a gun in poor vision or you don't have a gun and you have poor vision. It doesn't matter. There's a lot of different solutions. What having the firearm does is gives you the opportunity to use it under the situations where it fits as part of your personal defense or the defense of others situation. So I wouldn't arbitrarily say because you don't see as well as you did 20 years ago or as well as your 20-year-old cousin doesn't mean you shouldn't carry a firearm. What I would say is know your limitations, train and practice, figure out what you're capable of, and then just know when you carry that firearm out in the public space that your limitations are going to limit the situations in which it would be appropriate to use the firearm in a way that's maybe different from someone else.
Okay. The next one, Andre wants to know, when you push your arms, shoulders, and the firearm out from the ready position and everything is locked, do you put the front sight on the target before you touch and apply pressure to the trigger?
Technically, the answer is yes, but I'm going to read into the question a little bit and assume that what he's really asking is, am I confirming visually by focusing on the front sight that it is on the target? And that answer is, it depends. And there are situations where people will need to use their sights in order to meet the level of precision required. That might be because the target's smaller, the target's further away, because there's bystanders. Different types of guns require more control, more mechanical, cognitive control than others. If I'm shooting a J-frame under a certain set of conditions, a small revolver, I'll need to reference my sights because of the way that gun fits my hand, the fact that I don't train with it as much as other types of guns, and the fact that it's got a long, heavy trigger pull. I'll need to use my sights visually referencing them long before I would need to reference the sights on a full-size Glock 9mm, which fits my hand better, which has a lighter, crisper trigger, and which I train with more. So the question is difficult to answer point blank. The reason I said technically yes is because if you're kinesthetically aligning the gun, in other words, you're keeping your eyes on the threat, you looked over, you saw the threat, once you knew you needed to shoot, as you get your gun out, you maintain your visual focus on the threat, and you're driving that gun out in and parallel with your line of sight. Well, when it reaches extension, the front sight is going to be kinesthetically aligned on the target, but I'm not going to visually reference the front sight, compare it to the rear sight, which is sight alignment, and then compare that alignment to the target, which is sight picture, unless I need to. Everybody needs to under different circumstances, and you find out that you need to under certain circumstances by going out and getting realistic training and practice. So you do your realistic training and practice, you find out what you're capable of, and the advice we always give people at the end of the day is if you're in a shooting situation and you are wondering whether or not you should use your sights, use your sights. The simple fact that that's even entering your mind, go ahead and focus on the sight. Obviously, if it was something that was so imperative and so urgent that you drove out and started shooting without asking yourself that question, it's irrelevant now. You're not asking the questions. You didn't need the sights. The hope is that because of your prior practice and training, you're acting with confidence in the fact that you can just stay focused on the target and drive your gun out, as opposed to panic. Then you're just driving the gun out and hoping the bad man's going to stop.
Right. Okay. Jim would like to know if you can recommend a good bedside holster. He says he has no children at home, very rarely has children visit, and currently keeps his firearm loaded on the nightstand next to his wife. I have no room for another nightstand on my side of the bed and was considering a bedside holster.
Yeah, the model from Crossbreed Holster Company is the one that I've used for years, the bedside backup. In fact, instead of using the standard OHI holster module that uses a hook and loop fastener to attach to it, I use the holsters that I also use for my modular belly band. So the IC Training Company Crossbreed Team Up modular belly band uses holsters with hook and loop that come off of the belly band. And that same holster can be put on a hard point in the vehicle, can be mounted inside of a bag, can be mounted inside of a jacket with a concealed carry pocket or a purse, or the bedside backup device, which kind of fits between the mattress and the box spring and gives you a place to mount not only the gun, but you can mount a flashlight on it, you can mount spare magazines. That's the most universal and I think the easiest and highest quality, most efficient one for the bedside position, which is a great position to carry the gun in when you're not worried about the kids, coming into the room having a nightmare and not knowing what to do when the gun's next to the bed.
Okay. And Jim, a different Jim, he would like to know your thoughts on chambering versus not chambering around.
I assume that he's talking about in terms of carrying the gun on his person. We'll go from that. If you're not ready to carry a firearm in a holster that protects the trigger guard, that keeps the gun stably positioned on your body with a round in the chamber, then you're probably not ready to carry a firearm in the public space. Sure, there's an asterisk on that. You're better off with a gun. It kind of goes back to that vision conversation we had. If you have a gun without a round in the chamber, are there situations in which you would have time to see the situation developing, say, wow, this doesn't look like it's going to go well, take the firearm out of the holster, chamber a round, and then be prepared to act? Obviously there are, and many people have been in those kinds of situations. On the other hand, where we started earlier with the context-based training and the situational awareness, and we talked about planning on getting caught off guard, well, if I'm planning on getting caught off guard, now I have to shoot that guy. Now is not the time to be reaching for my gun knowing that it's unloaded, that I don't actually have a round in the chamber. So my position is get the training, get the exposure, get the experience, get the practice so that you're comfortable and confident with a round in the chamber if you're going to carry. The other reasons you might not want a round in the chamber, such as carrying a gun without a holster, maybe just throwing it in a pocket or something like that, that's a bad idea. That's a non-starter for me. So protect the trigger guard, keep the gun stably positioned on your body, and train, practice, get the experience, get the exposure so that you're comfortable and confident with a round in the chamber.
Okay. And this is from, I will call him Jim number 3, since I've just done 3 Jims in a row. He says, I believe you once said that you are right-handed and aim with your left eye. I have been doing this for more than 50 years and now own a Glock 19 that I have not taken to the range yet. I had usually practiced with a revolver and competed with a .22 caliber Ruger auto in the 60s. Do you practice using both hands with an automatic? Do you keep both eyes open? Any advice?
We'll go from that back forward. So yes, we always tell people to practice with 2 hands whenever they can, or practice to defend themselves with 2 hands on the gun whenever they can, but obviously there'll be times when you can't, so you also need to get some of that one-handed practice in as well. Much as we talked about with the kids, there's also times when you're going to be shooting with one hand, you may be pushing somebody behind you, but then if you had a malfunction, you needed to reload, you might bring that hand back to run the gun. And then there's other times when this hand's going to be so occupied or injured that we need to shoot and run the gun, reload with one hand and get back into the fight. So there's all kinds of reasons to train with both hands and with just one hand. What we don't want to do is start talking about switching hands because of our eye dominance. Eye dominance is something that really isn't important in terms of defensive pistol shooting. When you're talking about a rifle, and this is where this comes from, a rifle and especially a shotgun, when that gun is mounted to your face, when it's touching your face, obviously the alignment of the bead front sight on that shotgun is only going to be in front of one eye or the other. If your brain prefers to use the other eye, you're not going to be aligning yourself with the track of the shotgun pellets or the slug in that case, or the rifle, whatever's touching your face. So that's when it comes time to say if it's really bad, and we're not talking about a sporting situation where you can just obscure the lens of your shooting glasses and make your brain use the eye that's behind the bead to go with your handedness. That's when people talk about switching handedness. In defensive shooting, that is something that is very antiquated approach, and I think really a dangerous approach. We need to keep the gun in the hand that works really well. All of the tests for eye dominance, whether it's the thumb, close one eye, open the other, or the put out the hands and bring it back and see which eye the hole comes back to, those tests prove that when I stick my thumb out, when I stick my hands out, or when I stick a gun out, that gun's going to end up in front of the appropriate eye that my brain prefers to use. So it's something that gets way too much press, way too much talk, way too much overthinking. It's literally something the brain does in an automated way because the one eye or the other is dominant. Worrying about switching eyes for an extended shooting position with a pistol isn't something that people need to be doing. So my advice to, I think it was June number 3, get that Glock 19 out to the range, keep doing what you're doing. Yes, keep both eyes open when you're focused on the threat, but when you need to use your sights, close an eye and get your sight alignment and sight picture. The eye that you close is going to be the eye that your brain prefers, and it doesn't matter if the gun is held in front of your eye that your handedness it matches or held off in front of the eye that your handedness doesn't match. The thumb can be in either place, the gun can be in either place.
Okay. This next one is about grip. So Bill says he's confused about what the two-handed grip should be, and he would like you to explain it.
Okay. The two-handed grip should be one that covers as much of the gun as possible, is as high as possible on the gun without interfering with the gun's operation, and gives you as much contact between your two hands as possible. So those would be the most fundamental bullet points that I would give him. Have as much contact between the hands and the gun as possible. Have the gun sitting as low in the hand. Have the hand up as high on the gun as possible without obviously interfering with the operation of the gun, which not only can hurt reliability, but could literally hurt you if you're holding it improperly. And make sure there is as much contact as possible between your hands. So one of the things that we'll see sometimes is that people will hold the gun and leave a big gap between their hands, or they'll cross their thumbs in a way that pushes one hand or the other away from the surface of the gun. So we want to layer our thumbs and make sure our hands meet at the back side of the grip for as much contact as possible. Those are the 3 principles. And now, people will get really excited about thumb position. Do the thumbs point up? Do the thumbs point forward? If you follow those other 3 foundational principles, your thumbs will probably be pretty well layered and pretty well pointed forward, maybe just forward and a little bit up, off angle. I wouldn't worry about that nearly as much as those other 3 items. One thing you'll see is that sometimes people will have this gap right above this knuckle of the thumb, and by rotating that hand up and forward, they close that gap, and that's what makes that thumb point more parallel with the muzzle. And that's really the end game that a lot of people are describing. I prefer to think about the process of how we get to the thumb pointed forward than just arbitrarily saying point your thumb forward.
Okay. This next one is from Gary. He's confused about dry firing. He wants to know, how do you know if you're hitting the target when you dry fire?
I don't know. That's kind of important. And Gary, so if Gary's probably heard, like many of us have, that dry fire is incredibly important. I don't think it is. I think dry fire is okay. It can augment certain parts of your training, but the actual shooting part, the actual dry fire, it refines trigger control. It might help you pick up sight alignment, sight picture, but you never get to confirm that you're doing it right because the bullets don't show up. Obviously, you're not managing recoil, things like that. So you're really stepping way down the chain of usefulness when you go from live fire to dry fire. Now, practicing things like presentation from the holster to the ready position, that's a brilliant idea. Presentation even from the holster to a shooting isn't a horrible idea, except when you go to the shooting position, we should be following through with a shot. And this is really where things like the laser light training devices or any other laser insert training or a SIRT pistol, training pistol, any of the laser guns, at least let you practice your presentation from the holster to your first shot, because then your laser will tell you where you're hitting. Obviously, if you have any kind of a target system that records that, it's even better. So when we augment our live fire training with appropriate dry fire training, it can be a great aid. In the old days, we were told, do 1,000 dry fire trigger presses for every one, live shot. Well, that's marksmanship stuff. If you're going to be a bullseye shooter, if you're going to be a competition shooter, if you're talking about being a sniper rifle shooter, yes, those things can help, because you really have to refine that trigger press and your integration with the gun at that level. For defensive shooting, I think that dry fire, the way we used to talk about it in the industry, is way overrated. And even today, we need to be able to distinguish between how your dry practice can be valuable and how you could just be wasting your time, or worst case scenario, practicing the wrong things. Because again, if you're driving the gun out in front of your chin and looking at that laser dot on the wall and seeing the laser dot go where you want, well, that's great for a laser dot, but once you start trying to manage recoil, you're going to find out that you really wanted to be up here in front of your eye line, and that's going to be a big problem. So you practiced the wrong thing. Once again, we do have a DVD inside of the collection. It was with Claude Werner, a great instructor. He did a dry fire practice methodology DVD for our collection, and some of those clips are available, I know, for our premium members for sure, and probably in some of our free stuff as well at Personal Defense Network.
Okay. This next one is from Robert. He says, I'm set in my ways of shooting a rifle and can't see the value of the cramped style of shooting one hunched over with the elbow tucked in. The classic rifleman stance seems to be a thing of the past. He wants to know what's gained by using the hunched over style. It seems like 200 years of rifle technique have been cast aside. Can you enlighten me on what is gained?
Stability and recoil management, I think, are the two biggest things. So when you're talking about a bolt action gun, or if we're going to go 200 years and we're talking about muzzle loaders, single shot, when you fire a single shot, you want to have your bone structure supporting that rifle as much as possible, supporting all the weight of your body. You're going to hold your breath. You're going to be bladed. You're going to be shooting off to the side. There's going to be a lot of stability there for that one precise shot fired at an extreme distance. So that's the extreme version of answering that question. But if we just go back to 20 years ago, when people were still shooting a lot of bladed stuff, we'd see a lot of elbows up high. We lose stability, and we lose the ability to manage recoil nearly as well when the gun is coming off of our body when we're shooting. So when we're going to talk about a semi-automatic defensive carbine fired at inside of the house or around the patrol car, around your vehicle, around your front yard type ranges, where we're talking about rapid follow-up shots, being squared off, having the gun much more in our center line and having our elbows tucked in, weight slightly forward, bent forward at the waist, lowered center of gravity down as far as our knees being bent, because that's a realistic fighting position as opposed to a marksmanship position, and we're going to have much better control for recoil management, and we're going to be more mobile. So we're going to be able to, if we see a threat over here, we can bring the gun up much faster and shoot over here and over here than we could if we were off to the side and we really felt like we needed to turn our whole body when we could bring that gun up. So a whole bunch of advantages, but I think stability, recoil management, flexibility, mobility, all those are the big ones.
Okay. This next one is a scenario. William sent this in. You've had to shoot a bad guy at the local gas station. He's lying on the floor squirming around. Someone else called 911. So now what do you do with your gun? Do you reholster, put it on the floor, and step on it with one foot with your hands in the air, or something else?
It kind of depends on the timeline and the circumstances. What you don't want to do is let's talk about concepts and principles instead of specifics. What you don't want to do in that immediate aftermath is be seen as a threat. You want people to know that you were the good guy, you did something to defend yourself or someone else. So right away, there's a bunch of reasons we don't teach extended ready positions. We teach compressed ready positions. One of them is because you look a lot less threatening, right? So you don't know that whether there's another concealed carry person over here in the next aisle, whether the cop was sitting outside the parking lot. You don't know if there's an off-duty cop or an armed security guard there, or if the clerk himself has a gun, and now you've defended yourself or maybe defended the clerk, and now the clerk isn't sure if you were just another bad guy and you guys got into a fight. Nobody really knows. So if you're flagging a gun, waving it around at people, having out an extension, that's going to look more threatening than pulling the gun back into the ready position. Obviously, depressing the muzzle down where it's pointed in front of your feet is going to make it even less threatening, as people will not believe that you're pointing it at them. Communicating is really important, right? Making sure that maybe this hand is out in a defensive posture, the gun's pointed down, it's compressed against your body. Hey, I'm a good guy. Did someone call 911? Everyone relax. This and that. Those are all important things to be able to communicate. Now let's go fast forward. The police are arriving. So now the lights, the sirens, all that stuff's happening. Maybe a police officer is identifying himself. Maybe the security guard's identifying himself. That's the time that we start talking about maybe dropping the gun. Probably I'd prefer to see the gun reholstered and then keep your hands clearly away from the gun. But if the police are giving you instructions at that point, you do what they say. They say drop the gun, you drop the gun. They say lower the gun slowly to the ground, you lower the gun slowly to the ground. I wouldn't arbitrarily put the gun down on the ground and put your hands up, because we don't know if there's another bad guy. We don't know how long it's going to take the police to get there. We don't know if that squirming is going to stop and the bad guy is going to get back up or reach for another gun or anything else. So I wouldn't say surrender your gun until you know the police are there, but be prepared to do that and make sure that everyone in the immediate environment knows you're not a threat, even if that doesn't necessarily mean putting your gun away until the police are there on the scene.
Okay. And we had quite a few questions about EDC gear. I'm going to read this one from Eli. He asks, what do you feel is a minimum for EDC gear for the average person? I know there are a lot of valuable variables to consider, but for the most part, what do you feel is absolutely necessary? I have 3 children, 5 and under, that hang all over me all the time. I have an active lifestyle. I find it hard to carry all at once a handgun, an extra mag, a knife, a light, a less lethal, a tactical pen, a notepad, a backup handgun, a phone, keys, a wallet, etc. He goes, obviously that's a joke, but at times I feel like I have more tools than Batman. What do you feel is essential?
I agree with him. I think that sometimes, we look at an EDC, for those who know, is everyday carry. You look at the pictures that are posted. EDC pocket dump is one of the feeds that has a lot of those. You see a lot of people with that hashtag EDC. You look at all the pictures on Instagram. This is a good time to plug the new Personal Defense Network Instagram. Just joined Instagram last week. I think we're approaching 1,000 followers. So if you're on Instagram, check us out. What is that,
It's
Tanya?
at PD Network.
At PD Network. I'm at Pincus Rob, so you can find the PD Network link through some of my stuff as well. So that shameless plug out of the way. I see a lot of people carrying a lot of stuff, and I agree. I have an active lifestyle. I've got stuff going on all the time. As I said earlier, I'm in and out of places where I may be able to carry and may not be able to carry. Maybe going out for the evening, I'm going to be drinking, which means I'm not carrying. So there's all kinds of times where my everyday carry is my BlackBerry. Like this and a credit card and maybe some cash and the keys to whatever vehicle I'm driving, that's something that's every day. And I travel so much that it may be keys to a rental or something else. So on my keychain, I keep an improvised defensive tool called a decapitator, which is both a bottle opener and an improvised defensive tool for impact, for slicing, for slashing. That lives on my keychain. So that's an everyday carry type tool. Is it nice to have, if I'm in the city, I might have a pen and a flashlight. I almost always have a flashlight at least in a jacket pocket, or easy access inside of the vehicle, or in my messenger bag that I carry. I carry around one of the Blackhawk RFID blocking pouch messenger bags, and that's always got a lot of stuff in it too. As far as carrying a gun, obviously I'm carrying a gun probably about 90% of the time that I can when I'm legally able to carry, when I'm in a state where I legally can carry, I'm carrying a firearm. Do I always carry a knife? No, it's probably about 50-60% of the time. Do I have other improvised tools besides that one that I was talking about on my keychain? Maybe about 30-40% of the time. Pepper spray, almost never. I have some pepper spray. There at different times have been some in my vehicle. I'm not a big fan of pepper spray, so I almost never carry. In some places, I've been in some states in some situations where I couldn't carry a firearm, and I've carried one of the C2 personal defense taser devices where that was legal. There are some states where it's legal for me to carry a gun, but it's not legal for me to carry some of the knives that I carry. So the first thing is you got to know your laws. You have to know what is it legal for you to carry. In some states, your permit is a concealed weapons permit. In others, it's just a concealed handgun permit or concealed handgun license. So just because you can carry a gun doesn't necessarily mean you can carry some of the other tools that we might think of. Then we add in medical stuff, right? So that's a whole nother thing. So inside of all my vehicles and inside of most of my bags, I'll keep a compression bandage and a tourniquet. But I don't generally carry those on my person unless I'm in some heightened situation, right? There'll be other people who advocate always carry, a tourniquet and a compression bandage. You can get some that are shrink wrapped down and very easy to carry. Ankle carry is one of the things that we've talked about with Caleb from Lone Star Medics, who's another Personal Defense Network contributor. Ankle carry, or even just a small kit that slips into a pocket or a cargo pocket, is relatively easy for carrying all that. But again, we're all active, we're coming and going, we're getting in and out of the vehicle, we're moving around a lot, we got other things to do, we may or may not have it. I've got an infant on the way, so if I'm carrying around a diaper bag this time next year, that diaper bag may allow me to carry a lot more stuff than I would normally carry if I'm just wearing a polo shirt and jeans with the belt and pockets that I've got. So I don't believe there really is such a thing as everyday carry unless someone lives an incredibly boring life, a very consistent life where their dress is always the same, where their environment's always the same, where the laws are always the same. If you live that life, great. Everyday carry, as much as you feel is prudent. I'm not that lifestyle, and I don't think most people are. I think most people really do have to adjust what they carry and when they carry based on circumstances. So I wouldn't get too caught up in EDC, except that it's a great hashtag and it's a fun picture to post. Mine would vary quite a bit, with the exception of the BlackBerry.
Okay. Well, it looks like we got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you a couple more. This next one's from Juan. Your firearm is secured, and after having a few drinks, you hear somebody, and you realize someone's trying to break into your home. While you feel someone intoxicated, if you reach for your firearm and stop the threat, what legal ramifications will you face?
Well, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
I'm actually glad that question ended the way it did, because it would have been real easy to just say, don't go out there and investigate it, right? So if the question had been, do you go investigate or not, end of discussion. No, but you also, if you're stone cold sober, shouldn't go out and investigate, right? If you have family members you need to protect, there's extenuating circumstances. But if you're in your room and nobody else in the house is worth, or there isn't anybody else in the house that you're worried about protecting, or they're all people who can protect themselves, you keep the door closed, you get on the phone, call the police, and let the police come out and see what the noise in the yard is or what's going on out in your living room. You just don't need to go out there and expose yourself to danger. Intoxicated, all the more so, right? Because now you might take your judgment and your lack of dexterity into that fight with you, and even if it is a fight, better to avoid it than to be involved in it with impairment. And if it's not a fight and you misjudge, you misinterpret, it's your cousin, it's your neighbor, it's one of your kids, God forbid, in the living room, and you think it's a threat because of the alcohol, now you've got a problem. So this comes down to the, do you limit your access to firearms? I mentioned a few minutes ago, if I'm going out to have a few drinks with dinner or with friends or whatever, I don't carry a gun. And I know there's people cringing, and we'll get internet responses, oh, the executive director of Personal Defense Network doesn't carry a gun all the time. Well, guess what? I was just with 70,000 people who are integrally involved in the shooting industry in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I guarantee you 98% of them were not carrying guns, and probably closer to 100% than I'm giving it credit for. And I'm doing that just to kind of accommodate some of the guys that are carrying a gun against the show rules, maybe against the law, and certainly if they're out there drinking or they're on the casino floor out there in Vegas, they're violating the law if they have their firearm. And I know very, very, very few people at SHOT Show historically who have done that. And I've been going for 19 years. So there are plenty of firearms professionals, whether they're open about it or not, that realize there are situations that we get into where you're not going to have access to a firearm, and possibly being drunk even if you're in your own bed is one of those times. And that's why we have good locks. That's why we have alarms. That's why we might have a dog, all of those things. Now back to the point of the question, what are the ramifications? At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. If you had to defend yourself, right? If you're standing there in your room and there's a firearm there, and the guy comes into your room and he's got an axe and he says he's going to chop off your head, you don't not grab the firearm because you had a few drinks a few hours earlier, right? You still have an obligation to yourself and to society, I think, that responsibility to defend yourself. If you have access to the firearm and you use it successfully to stop that threat, could there be ramifications? Could the civil suit be different? Could the criminal charges even be different if there were going to be any? Certainly. But the reality is you don't have an axe in the middle of your head, right? So we know what the ramifications of getting an axe in the middle of your head are. I'd rather take the variable of I had a few drinks the night before, before I went to bed. That's very, very different from choosing to carry a firearm while intoxicated. I think they're really two very, very different worlds. On those occasions where I do go out, have a couple drinks, I'm not carrying a gun. That doesn't mean I'm not going to have my home defense firearm still staged. And 3-4 hours into my night's sleep, if I get woken up and I'm barricaded in my room, I'm still probably going to have that gun in my hand if I can get to it.
Okay. All right, so final question of the night. I'm sorry we couldn't get through all of them, everyone, but, Rob will be answering them later. This is a very serious question. We had many questions rolling in about proper facial hair length along with feeling confident on the range. But I think this one from Officer Carter asked it best. Out of the many things you discuss on PDN, there is a major thing that I think you have failed to touch on that could benefit many PDN describers. That is, how can I look as cool as you, Rob, while at the range? Should I grow a goatee? Or is range swag something that people are just born with?
I don't even know what to do with that. I don't have a goatee. Right now, I've kind of got this like little miniature beard thing going on right now. So I may have ruined Officer Carter's question. I don't know. You know, I think range swag. Don't.
I think we should do hashtag range swag. I think that would be awesome.
To ask people, post your pictures at Personal Defense Network Facebook pages or over at Personal Defense Network's new Instagram. Post your pictures of you showing us your range swag, maybe.
Yes.
I think the coolest way to be cool on the range is to be the safety guy. Be the guy that's not afraid to, tell somebody to put their glasses on when they're shooting without glasses at a public range. Tell somebody, that's got their thumb crossed over behind their semi-automatic, and obviously go to the management, go to the range safety officer, but eventually, I've heard people say, well, you don't want to confront people, you just walk away, it's not your problem. Well, the problem is that they represent the shooting community, and if they get hurt out at that range, that affects our insurance, it affects the news media, maybe it affects the politics. They go home and their wife says, oh, you got to stop shooting, and then she doesn't want to shoot because she saw the expert guy break his thumb because he was holding the gun wrong. Be the safety guy. That's the best way to be cool on the range. Not be an ass about it, but make sure people aren't getting hurt out there. And grow whatever facial hair your wife, girlfriend, or target demographic are interested in.
Okay. Well, do you have anything else you want to add as we wrap up?
I think this was fun. I'm sure we'll do more of these. What I'd like to do is get some of our other contributors in, so that may be something else people can send in or comment on our Facebook page or the Instagram, anywhere. Send us a tweet. What other contributors? And we've had like 20 or 30 different guys come in and help us with Personal Defense Network content. Who else would you like to see on some of these? We can put 3 or 4 or 5 people on these at once, maybe collect different questions in different specialized topic areas. I enjoy these. I think they're fun, and it's obviously a great way to interact. And thank everybody for their response too, because I was shocked when you actually sent me an email earlier this week that said we already had over 200 responses with questions, and I thought you were kidding. And then I thought maybe the questions would be more along the lines of the facial hair stuff like that. But there were well over 200 very legitimate questions. This was a great sample. I appreciate you guys getting together and picking them because it's more fun for me. I think it's better for the audience watching when you hear my off the top of my head kind of answers. It's not scripted. It is what it is. Thank you, Sonia, for putting all that together, the whole team in Minneapolis at Personal Defense Network headquarters, and thank all of our subscribers, our premium members, of course. Everybody go check out the website and stay tuned for social media announcements about when we're going to do this again.
Yeah, and Rob, you're going to be answering questions on the YouTube video after we sign off here?
Right, so what we're going to do is anybody that posts things in the comments, sometime, let's say over the next 24 hours, we'll be posting answers. I'm going to jump on it right away, watch it for a little while, and then we'll just keep an eye on this thread and let it grow, and we'll keep answering questions for a certain period of time, and then we're going to start collecting those questions, and we'll use them for the next one.
All right, well, thank you so much, and thank you, everyone, for submitting all your questions.
Good night.
All right, good night.